Hi all and welcome to today's webinar. I'll Ask Me Anything with one of our past students. Her name is Amy and she'll be speaking about her amazing experience on the program as well as the success that she's seen. So thank you everyone for your time. Before we get into everything planned out for today, just some general information. Please note that this webinar will be recorded and made available on our YouTube channel after this session, along with all our other amazing video content on the course. So please feel free to check that out. And please use the chat function today for any comments, and we will be having a separate Q&A session at the end. So any questions you specifically have for Amy about her experience and what it's like to be a product manager, please use that Q&A function. So to introduce myself, my name is Jamie. I'm an enrollment advisor here at Fourth Year for the last 2 years, and I've assisted hundreds of students so far in helping decide if this program is the right fit. So to give you a brief on the program itself, it's been designed in partnership with King's College London, along with some industry partners like Atlassian, Dropbox, and amazing other companies to make sure that our program is both academically rigorous, but it also meets the industry demand of skills and knowledge sets. So we've put all of this together into a 6-month career accelerator meant to be very practical and meant to help you walk away after the 6 months very confident in pursuing a career path within this industry. So having a look at the 6-month program, it's fully online and remote. So for anyone that can't commit to full-time in-person study and that needs something a bit more flexible, then this is a fantastic option. Over the 6 months, you'll be doing a mixture of self-paced learning, which is going to be about 12 to 15 hours on average for each learner. That is slightly different. But to get through the main course content, which is your portfolio building and the networking and peer-to-peer reviews, we safely say try and budget about 15 hours. Once a week, there'll be a live session, which all learners are welcome to join. This is an interactive session with our course facilitators, and we hire our facilitators directly from industry. So you are going to be learning from the experts themselves. All live sessions are recorded. A lot of our candidates are working full time and might not be able to attend every single week, but we make sure you won't miss out on the value. So all live sessions will be put onto our learning platform for you to go ahead and watch those at a later stage. Again, please use our chat function for any comments on our Q&A session for any questions that you might have. We'll definitely get to all of them a bit later on. So over the 6 months, our course is split into 4 components. We have 3 6-week courses, and each course is designed to cover a different stage of the product lifecycle. For example, course 1, we're looking at ideation, building out a business case, and making sure that you've done enough research into the market to confidently say that this product is viable and worth investment. Our second course moves on to product design and development, where we're focusing on the processes of building a prototype, conducting user testing, and also putting together a release plan for your product, which explains all about how it's going to be developed. For the third course, we are looking at launching a product into the market. So you've thought of the great idea, you've built the prototype, and now you need to get it in front of the customer. So this course will be all about the communication plans involved, the different launch strategies, and how to also notice trends and metrics to then measure the success of that product in the market. So by the end of course 3, you should have a well-rounded skill set to then confidently step into that product manager role. To top everything off, our final 6 weeks is a live business project. And this is fantastic because this is a real world project. It gives you real market exposure. And we partner with top organizations in the UK with existing products in the market to help you and your portfolio really stand out after leaving this program. So you'll have some real work experience under your belt. And then once that is complete, you'll do a consultancy style presentation to the organization, and you will deliver your unique way of thinking and problem solving directly to them, and they will provide you live feedback. So this will be the 4 portfolio projects which you'll walk away with. And ultimately, this is used to showcase this new skill set that you have. Now, once learners have gone through the 6-month process, you would then finish off by receiving a certificate of completion, specifically in product management. So a fantastic achievement to wrap up this amazing experience. Now, in addition to all this coursework, we have, or a big part of our program is career support, by providing each student a chance to work with a executive style career coach in one-on-one sessions, both over the 6 months of the program as well as 3 months after. So you'll get a chance to decide when is the right time for you to start the journey with your career coach. Ultimately, they are going to be doing a lot of self-assessments with you to understand what are the areas in which you'd like to improve. Perhaps look at what are your weaknesses and how can you leave this program with a whole new skill set, both professional and personal. So you decide on when you're meeting with your career coaches and also what those sessions should ultimately be about. And it's always going to be about achieving the intended career outcome that you have set up for yourself. So you'll get sessions with them. And at the end of this program, our main goal is to see that every student has achieved their intended outcome. So getting your certificate is a half of the journey, but the second half is actually a tangible result. And for most, it's landing that job as a product manager. Now, this would sum up the Career Accelerator over the 6 months. And joining us today is one of our past students that joined us, had to make the tough decision of actually investing, going through the process of studying and committing, and then ultimately having that investment pay off for her. So we'll be chatting everything. Amy, please join us, and everyone, please welcome Amy. Um, it's an amazing story that she has to share with us today. But I thought, just for the benefit of the audience, maybe you can introduce yourself. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. We were saying it's going to get confusing, isn't it, Jamie and Amy?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. I was in your boat about 18 months ago. I actually joined an AMA with Jamie's colleague Daniel, deciding whether this was an investment I wanted to make. So obviously, when I was asked 18 months later if I wanted to be involved in an AMA, then I was happy to do so. So do you want me to just talk a little bit around my kind of journey, my context, the context of how I kind of came to do the program, Jamie? What would you like me to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
Okay,
we'd all love to know that decision-making
brilliant.
process.
So this was a career change for me. I think there's a sort of good divide within the course of people that are looking to maneuver within the product or move into, so some sort of data analysts and that sort of maybe more technical people that were looking to get product skills, or people that were looking to move within their product career and try and get some more skills. A lot of people that had actually found themselves in product roles didn't really know what they were and had sort of been a bit on the fly with all their sort of learning, and we're looking for a sort of more comprehensive understanding of exactly what their job scope was. I was the other person, which was that I had a lot of life skills, but no specific product management skills. I was a personal assistant for about 15 years and had decided that having moved and made some other changes within my life, that I wanted to make a career change as well, sort of in for a penny, in for a pound. I also have my brother-in-law, who I'm close to, is a product manager. So I'd sort of been skirting around the issue, kind of talking to him about what his job entailed. He is probably more of a technical product manager, whereas I was sort of looking to be more of a business product manager. That's definitely my skill set, with communication and stakeholders and that sort of side of product I was looking into. Off the back of that, I heard about the Fourth Rev course, and it tied in nicely. It allowed me to leave my wrap up all the personal assistant jobs that I was doing. I was freelance at that point, and working for a number of clients, wrap them up tidily with a view to committing to. So I started last October. I was the October cohort, and finished in June of this year. At the same time, I took a job with a company that was local to me. It was a car insurance company, actually, so nothing that I'd ever had any oversight of, any opinions of, apart from having to do my own car insurance every year. But it was a company that I knew was a good local employer, and also that there was a lot of maneuverability within that business in terms of people being able to join at the bottom and then work their way sideways, left, right, up, down, etc. So that was what I was looking for. It also was I did quite a lot of research about the company. It has quite a tech savvy CEO, who really had made sure over the last 5 years that digital and product was all very much at the core, because product is ostensibly about customers. So that is their focus. So that was, so the product role, there was a lot of, within the business side, obviously there was a lot of sort of tech side to that as well, with the digital elements, but the business side of product, there was a lot of roles that I knew that I could maneuver into. So I absolutely started at the bottom. I was on the phones speaking to customers, which actually is how a lot of people have started within this business, I found out. And it was brilliant because it allowed me to study, it allowed me to work in a way that was very hands off. I sort of did my job, logged off, and I didn't really have to think about it. So the combination of the two worked really well. With a view that I started reaching out as soon as I started, in my customer service role, to product managers, on the advice of, I know, Jamie, you mentioned the career coaches, but I have to give a really big shout out to mine, Claire, who is still in touch with me and has just been absolutely brilliant. And was one of the biggest surprises of the course, because I'd never had sort of any sort of career coaching before, but she really encouraged me to start reaching out early on, start going for coffees, trying to see if there was a mentorship program that I could go into. And what I was really, that combined with the fact that a lot of the jobs within the company that I work for are secondments, or they only advertise in-house. So that kind of gave me a real advantage in trying to get a product role. So fast forward to June, and the day that I actually did my final presentation, so the project that we had to do with my team, I had my final interview for my product manager role in the afternoon. So that was a day that I will never forget. And found out that afternoon that I'd actually gotten the role as a product manager executive. So started that on the 1st of July. So it was a roller coaster. There was a lot of long days and late nights. It was a real baptism of fire. There's probably a lot that I would do differently, which I'm happy to sort of go into detail about. But it's been brilliant. So I sort of spent the summer, as a product management, working in the communications team as well. So what our focus is, making sure that the comms that go out to customers are adhere to regulatory, because it's an insurance company I work with. So that's been very enlightening. So it's the regulatory constraints that we have to make sure that they adhere to, consumer duty, but also just making sure that they're sort of personable and helpful. And so that's a big project that I'm involved with. So the job that I'm doing is a secondment, so it's 9 months, helping revise a lot of the claims, so that car insurance and home insurance claims communications that go out to customers, from push notifications to SMSs to letters, emails. Obviously, there's a broad spectrum of customers that are all contacted in lots of various ways. So it's quite a big undertaking, and I'm hoping that I can sort of stay on in some capacity. But as I said, it's only been a couple of months, so fingers crossed that will happen. So yeah, that's sort of my journey, really.
Thank you so much for sharing, Amy. That's a fantastic journey. It speaks to a lot of what we value at Fourth Rev, and that's providing support and also helping our students achieve ultimately what they can achieve, but empowering them to do so. I'd like to jump quickly back to the decision-making process. And I think we had such a varied, success rate of learners going into so many different industries. Coming in, did you have an idea of the type of products you wanted to work with, or was that something you figured out along the way?
In my head, I had thought that I wanted to, it was for me, it was about the team and the company sort of ethos versus what I did. I had worked in some sort of I'd worked in fashion and I'd worked in media and I'd worked in sort of what you would consider quite a lot of sort of sexy, businesses. But I knew that that didn't necessarily come with the sort of to be diplomatic here, with this sort of people culture that I was after. So for me, it was about finding the right fit in terms of the people. So I don't mind, and actually there's a whole section of the course where you did with the induction, and one of my advice to the people that were listening to is really, I don't think I focused on that enough. We did a sort of quite a substantial induction process where they talked about, there was lots of sort of reading and quizzes and loads and sessions and lots of sort of trying to get to the nitty gritty, to the sort of nuts and bolts as to why you're doing this course and what you want to get out of it. And that was actually really insightful for me. I think I sort of thought it would be it would be a sort of tick box exercise. And actually it was a really good process for me, because it did make me realize, in terms of the priorities, what I really wanted to do was work for a company that had a good culture, that had a real 9 to 5 culture as well, working from home, flexibility, people first, and whether that was car insurance, whether that was an app, whether that was something technically minded, whether that was a physical product or a service, that wasn't important to me. It was the sort of the people culture that was the most important.
Well, thanks for sharing, and that's a very good point. We often see learners coming to the program for different reasons. Sometimes it's monetary focus. Others they want to find a place that really works for them, and this is what our career coaches focus on the most. It's helping you find what drives you. Is it the product that you'll be working with? Is it the people, or are you after something slightly different? So this is great to hear that we've helped you to realize what it is that you wanted out of it. So fast forwarding, after the decision was made to join us, now a lot of our students either have not been to university, or it's been many, many years since they have. What was the learning curve like for you, just starting out?
It was huge. I mean, I'm of age and I started university and actually never finished it because I got a job in the industry that I wanted to work in. And so I decided to put that on pause and then never went back. So my study skills were rusty, to say the least. But there was a real mix of people. There was people that had sort of, within the cohort that I was in, people that had had got very advanced degrees, people that had just finished studying, people that had worked for quite a long time, people that were like me, that hadn't really studied, had sort of started or stopped or not even done a university course. So there was quite a sort of mix. So for me, probably the biggest barrier I found was the sort of study skills and sort of how to organize myself in terms of how to study best, I guess, best practices. And again, to kind of go back to that induction phase of the course, I think that was a really good, I don't think I probably in hindsight spent enough time and energy on that. So I did feel like the first sort of session, the first 6-week course that we did, I was sort of slightly having to tweak my study sessions, or how was I trying to sort of make sure that I was getting, especially with working full time, getting the most out of the course. So that took a bit of adjusting. And so my sort of big piece of advice would be make the most of that induction session and really make sure that you've got a good plan in place, because mine was very loosey-goosey and I sort of did end up having to sort of play catch up a bit while having to learn content as well, which was quite overwhelming at the beginning.
No, I can fully imagine. And for the benefit of our audience, our induction period is the first 3 weeks of the program. We refer to it by a few names: orientation, onboarding. And in this 3 weeks, it's ultimately about getting you set up for success. We'll have a few group sessions, and it's a good way for those to get warmed up to the program. We do find many students that underestimate the value of these sessions, but really, as Amy has mentioned, they are extremely important, especially if your skills are a bit rusty or you haven't studied in a while. It's good to start to get into that rhythm. And a big part of what we're saying is that the course is flexible. how was the time balance for you? Do you think it was consistent throughout the course, or were there times you were spending more time on the course and others perhaps less time?
Definitely. So I'm gonna yeah, so I out of the three 6-week courses, there was I can't remember what it's called. I'm so sorry, it's terrible. But the
No
middle course
problem.
that we did,
Hmm.
which was a lot sort of more technically based. I liked the first one because that was more theoretical. That was kind of coming up with your idea, putting it into practice. That one I really struggled with. So I felt like I devoted a lot more time to that. But the good thing was, by the time I got to the second course, I had a good process in terms of my studying and a good timetable in terms of my studying. I kind of knew how it worked. I mean, for me, I worked a lot in the evenings. That tended to work for me. And then at weekends as well, it just wasn't possible for me to work during the day. And actually, what was great about the course is that Fourth Ref sort of tailored that. I think we started off with our facilitator session was just once a week. And then we said that we would like twice a week, one during the day and one for those that were only available in the evening. So that was brilliant as well, because it afforded me that flexibility so that if I was able to get out at lunchtime and work and do the course, then I would do so. But generally, I tended to do the sort of the evening ones as well. So that was, I think, testament to Force Red, but also we had an amazing facilitator and he was really super accommodating. So he was happy to kind of take our feedback and add in that extra session. So I think that really helped as well. I mean, there were definitely weeks where I wasn't able to make either. And so I looked at the recordings, and that was it wasn't as beneficial, because I think to sort of be in the moment and to be able to ask those questions was really helpful. But I didn't feel like it was sort of a hindrance. It didn't make me feel, because everybody was so contactable and because the facilitator was so great, if I needed to sort of follow up and kind of go, I haven't really gauged what we're supposed to be doing here, or I'm not really sure about this, he was always happy to kind of to get back to you around the sort of clarification of sessions. So yeah, it was a lot of juggling, but as I said, I think that probably that second 6-week course, it was the content that I struggled with a lot more, so that took me a lot more time. And then obviously the employer project was, but that was tricky, but that was more around managing other people's timetables and just making sure that we had enough sessions together with regards to the sort of the project itself, and making sure that we were kind of communicating. But I mean, if you want to talk about the employer project, I can kind of go into details about that. But that probably took a lot more managing, but that was less about me. That was more about the sort of facilitating the others within my group.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And we will definitely get into the employer project a bit more. But just quickly, for the benefit of the audience, what are the structures of those weekly sessions like? Is it open discussion? Is there an actual structure to them?
So there was a bit of both, depending on what the content was. And actually, what was great is the facilitator would take the lead from us. Obviously, there would be certain bits that he would have to go through, but it was very much led by him. So quite often there would be sessions where we would have like a presentation from him about specifics. He'd run through some slides, and then we'd go into breakout rooms and we'd have to work sort of as small groups, or we'd work as pairs. And then kind of come back into the end. And then the facilitator would drop into those breakout rooms and just to check that everybody was on the same page. I would say that was probably the most of the sessions, but there were also sessions that he put on that were Q&A sessions. If people were struggling and sort of had gotten in touch with him quite a lot that week because the course content that had been released was a bit unclear or nitty gritty, or there was just some detail to it that people were really struggling with, then he would specifically focus on that and allow us to sort of ask the questions that we needed to. And especially when we were kind of coming up to the end of a course and we had our submissions were due as well, then he would make sure that we'd usually it would be an additional session that he put in on his own accord and just sort of say, look, I've got this session if anybody wants to drop in and have, and run through anything that they're not sure about with regards to this particular project.
Oh, thanks for sharing. And I'm always hearing amazing stories about our facilitators.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're always going above and beyond for our students, both in your cohorts and other cohorts that I've heard as well. So another question I've had is, people often ask, how are the exams? How are the tests? And then I have to say, no, this is a very practical career accelerator program. Could you speak on what we mean by
Yeah.
practical?
Yeah. So, I mean, the way that the course is released within those 6 weeks, you have a submission at the end of that. So the theory is, and actually I got better at this probably by the sort of second and third course that we did, is that you sort of work on the project as you're kind of learning and as you're kind of going along. And in theory, that did work, and it did mean that you had then less to do. It wasn't sort of you've done all this 6 weeks of course, and then you've got to suddenly come up with a project in a couple of days because it's due at the end of the course. It was sort of as you were learning, as you were there was sort of small exercises that you could do to kind of contribute towards this project at the end. And the more that I did those, the more that I found that I actually had the content that I needed for the project at the end. It was just a case of sort of bringing it all together and making it cohesive. So there weren't tests or anything like that. It was more sort of ongoing learning with a view to sort of those 6 week bites. You kind of got to the end of it, and then you had to kind of, you saw the sort of full picture. It's like doing a jigsaw puzzle, I guess. You're sort of doing it, but kind of not really knowing what the full picture is. And by the end of the 6 weeks, you've got the full picture, but you kind of have to go back and just double check that what you see is correct. So it was a good way of doing it, because it just meant that you were constantly revising what you'd learned, and what you were kind of going through, what you were learning was being put into practice as well. So and then obviously that was for the 3 6 week courses, and then there was the employer project, which is slightly different at the end, which was much more, that was, we had projects that were due within that. So we had a project after a couple of weeks, and then 4 weeks, and then 6 weeks was the project and the presentation as well. So that one was definitely a lot more work. But again, it was a divide and conquer. You were in a group, so it wasn't like you were having to do all of it on your own with those sort of deadlines. So it was absolutely, yeah, manageable.
Great. No, that's good to hear. And do you think that the final employer project, which we'll touch on a bit in a second, was a lot of new learning, or do you think it actually helped you incorporate everything you've learned into that project?
I think it was a bit of both. I think it was definitely a case of putting into practice what you had learned throughout the course. I also think it was a lot of what I learned was from the other people that I was in the group with, some of whom were product managers, some of whom were product manager adjacent, some of who, I had a guy in my group who was from user research. So that was really interesting. So he was trying to get from sort of UX to over to more of the product side within his role. So everybody kind of brought different things to the table, and we were all really, you know, in terms of ages and genders and backgrounds, it was all very varied. So I think there was an element of learning from other people in terms of the practicalities, in terms of the content of the course. And then obviously you bring in the whole working with lots of different people on a project where you're all remote. Some of you aren't even, you know, in the same country, and the challenges that kind of, and the pluses and minuses, because there was definitely positives to, and it was very rewarding, but there was definitely some sort of challenges around learning to work with different people who have lots of different ideas and lots of different ways of doing things. And also the challenge of then saying, well, this is the way that something was taught in the course, versus you're saying that you do something slightly different in real life within your product role. So sort of trying to kind of marry the two, and again, to kind of go on about it. But that's when the facilitator really came into their own again. So our particular one was great at having sort of weekly sessions with us where we could kind of go, look, we think this means this, but so-and-so does this at their job, or so-and-so has interpreted this way, and him kind of going from a course point of view, from a real life point of view, this is what I would suggest. But us having to, as a team, you know, make the decisions that you would have to make as a product manager in a real life anyway, where there's lots of grey and not a lot of black and white.
No, I mean, thanks for sharing. And something you're saying really stands out to me. It's that level of collaboration. I think there's, when it comes to online study, it's often thought of as a siloed thing you do, like you're all alone, for 6 months you'll be doing this. How valuable was that collaboration and network on this course for you?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely some collaboration within the weekly sessions in those courses before, because we had small breakout rooms. There was a WhatsApp group that was set up quite like at the beginning. There's also the forum. I don't know what you use now, but we had the kind of Facebooky Messenger type forum that we were able to communicate with you guys, with our facilitator, and with each other on that as well. I know there were some people that did some meetups as well. I went to one of them in London, so that was beneficial. But the collaboration thing was definitely, yeah, probably the biggest part of this course. And also the most, as I sort of touched on before, it was challenging, but it was definitely beneficial because you felt like you were, it was very easy to kind of do those 6 weekly courses, and especially with the way that the course develops and you're coming up with ideas and then you're testing them, and there's lots of different things that are kind of put into play, but it's all made up in a sense. You know, there aren't customers to speak to, there aren't there's very little feedback that you can kind of get. So the employer project was absolutely eye-opening in terms of not only having to deal with other collaborators, colleagues, people, and relationships and ways of working and styles of working, but also with a very specific brief from a real life company that has their own culture and ethos and ways of working, and having to kind of put that into practice. Yeah, it was brilliant. It was really massively rewarding, but I would say definitely challenging as well.
No, thanks. And I always say, I think that it's from my perspective, that it's the employer project that really gives you that confidence. Because once you're done with that, you can say, look, I've worked with ideal clients. I've done this before. Was that how you felt? Did you feel
Yeah.
that the employer project really made you feel that confident?
Yeah. I think it brought all the lessons that you've learned into practice, basically, is a good way of putting it. So it just meant that you know, all these things that you've been theorizing about were put into, you know, they were practical. You know, you could see how they worked in real life. So it was, as I keep saying, very challenging but incredibly rewarding. And you could see it was a good link between the theoretical that you've been kind of doing and then the real world. It was a kind of good conduit between the two. I think if you just had the theoretical, it would be really hard to kind of potentially put that into practice in real life. Whereas this was, you know, a good sort of bridge between the two.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's you know, all the stories I hear of the employer project is always that it's provided so much value, so much context, and it's really helped shape the portfolio to help stand out. Now, what we often call the program within the program is the career coaching,
Yeah.
because it's not always as straightforward. It's a lot of hard work and dedication put into the career coaching as well. And you've clearly had a great relationship with Claire, who one of our best
Yeah.
career coaches. So can you maybe just brief us a little bit on how those sessions went? When did you ultimately use them? And yeah, I'm sure the audience would love to know.
I mean, for me particularly, I was coming into a completely new industry. I've never had a LinkedIn. I've never had anything like that. So there was a lot of hand holding with my sessions with Claire. But on the flip side, I had quite a specific focus as to what the outcome of this course and what I wanted from it. I knew that I was in the company that I was ultimately going to work for, and it was just trying to get some help finding opportunities, and also my portfolio, and just and LinkedIn, and making sure that all those things were kind of covered off as well. So I actually struggled. I had a session with Claire in the first 6 weeks. I struggled to get one in for the second 6 weeks, just because of the rigors of the course and my life and just various things that had sort of happened at that point. And then the course that that we completed, the third course, I have had my session with Claire around the time that I was getting my role. So that was around sort of interview prep and helping me out. I've got one more with her, finally. She's sort of delayed it slightly at the end of September, where we're going to focus on my LinkedIn, which was the one thing that sort of left hanging, ironically, that I got the role but don't actually have a LinkedIn. But that's something that I'm really keen to kind of get to a point where I can just maintain it. So because I know that moving forward, depending on whether I stay in the company that I'm in, then I just want to make sure that it's sort of fresh, and to have her expertise has been brilliant. But I mean, they're kind of practically, they're full of useful knowledge, and it's really tailored towards product as well, which I think was great. It's not sort of general careers advice. They have all worked within tech industries or worked with product managers, so they kind of know what the job entails and what you need. There's also, I don't know if you mentioned it, they do little webinars that you can kind of join or watch later, that are about sort of specifics from, you know, how to get the best out of your portfolio, you know, interview techniques, like anything like that, that were really helpful to kind of look at a later date. But they were also just massively responsive, really, you know, Claire was just, she was just really brilliant and really proactive. So if I hadn't booked a session, she would sort of nudge me and go, you know, we need to chat about this. We've got your goals here, you know, can you try and book something in for me? So it was good. It was sort of like a little conscience kind of going, you need to do this, because it is very easy to get wrapped up in the content and wrapped up in the sort of the learning aspect of it. But I think it's important to remember that the career path is important as well, because that's ultimately the content you'll have, but the career path is inevitably sort of going to help you actually get the role that you want to get.
Oh, thanks so much for sharing. And if anyone's worried about not finding Amy on LinkedIn, as you heard, it's
Yeah, you
coming
can't find me.
soon.
You will
It's
do
it's
from
coming.
October.
It
Claire
will
will
be
make
coming
sure of
soon.
it.
Yes, so everyone feel free to check it out end of October. So this ultimately leads us to the most anticipated piece of today. It's your career outcome. Now, thanks to everything you've mentioned, it's ultimately led to success. Could you brief us on how the success came about? I know you touched on a little bit earlier, but really, what was that process like from going from the program you've just invested in to now actually having an outcome?
Yeah. So as I said, I had my interview on the day that I had the presentation for the employer project, which was quite a lot. But in the run up to that, I'd followed Claire's advice, and I'd done lots of sort of reaching out within the product industry. My company that I work for has got quite a good intranet, and there's lots of internal vacancies and things like that. So I sort of knew the hierarchy of the business and knew who I wanted to work for. I actually reached out to a product manager in January. I mean, I got the job that I got, which was different in July, but it was probably a bit premature at that point. But she'd sort of kept me on her radar. And then when the job that I ultimately went, I actually went for a slightly different job. I went for a job in something called Smart Comms in June, and ultimately ended up in a job in the communications department as a product management executive, because they just thought that my skill set was better suited to that, which is just another reason why I was so happy that I decided to start at grassroots with this company, because they sort of recognize that I was of benefit having done this course, having with my CV, my experience in terms of PAing. They knew that I may not necessarily have the skills around car insurance communications. That wasn't something I knew very much about, but I had different skill sets. I had product management skill sets, and then I also had my PAing skill sets around stakeholder management and communication, and you know, all those things that are, you know, 15 years in a job like that you become quite adept at. So I had 2 interviews within the space of a week, so Monday, Wednesday, and then my final interview on the Friday. And then I started the job on the 1st of July. And since then, I've hit the ground running. I started with another product management executive who started 2 weeks after me. We had, there's a third in the cohort, and then we have a lead that is in charge of us. But I'm within the digital and commercial and marketing team as well. So there are so many product managers in loads of different roles. So what's really good about the job that I'm in is it is a secondment. It's got me a foot in the door. But whether I then choose to stay within this role, or I decide to move to a slightly different department, something that maybe is more commercial, less marketing, something maybe more marketing, I haven't quite decided yet. But it's amazing to have those sort of opportunities. But I feel like I put the grunt work in, having been on the phones to customers, and I think that has been of benefit to it was definitely a benefit to my interview process, because they knew that I sort of put customer first and foremost, that at the heart of everything. And I actually think that that is one of the benefits of the course as well, that there was a lot around sort of empathy, particularly from our facilitator. You know, he was a product manager and medical product manager, so medical businesses, medical tech. And so for him, the customer is absolutely at the heart of everything that they do, because we're talking about customers that are also quite often patients or relatives of patients. So that was a great thing to have done. And actually, having worked, perfect example is I had a meeting this week, which was with a product owner that was looping us into some changes that they'd made to the digital journey for claims. And they hadn't actually spoken to anybody that was customer facing. It had all been the Scrum team had sort of come up with this idea to make this all really beneficial, to be able to add claims digitally, and it was fabulous. And customers were going to be able to put what they wanted to claim, but they weren't ever going to get any sort of reference number. They weren't ever going to get any sort of receipt or email or communications around what they'd actually added. So it was the perfect example that my facilitator used to talk about all the time of a product manager who had not put the customer at the heart of what they were actually doing. And this was somebody that was quite high up in the business. And I gather it's not the first time that this has happened, but it was really interesting to see the sort of this theoretical from the course of this is what happens if you don't put the customer at the heart of all of your interactions. It has to always, at every point, it has to come back to the customer. And this hadn't happened. And actually the digital journey was to drive people away from calling in. But actually all this was going to do is have people call in and go, did you get my claim? Because I haven't received anything from you. So it was this sort of like something that you think is quite fundamental, but all it took was to speak to anybody that is customer facing, and they would have said, this is not going to work for this and this reason. And this, we were told about this on Monday, and it's going live tomorrow. So I think that's a whole, you sort of, they've paved the way, but it's the wrong path, and sort of trying to unpick that is going to be really interesting. But so things like that have been fascinating in terms of this role over the last couple of months. I've worked with some really great people as well, that are amazing communicators, very much put customers at the heart of everything that they do. But this was such a good example of how a particular Scrum team had kind of gotten so overexcited and kind of in their own sort of bubble, had kind of not talked to anybody outside of this bubble, and had just thought, from a tech point of view, this is going to be so brilliant because look how it looks good, and this journey is going to be brilliant for the customer. But they actually hadn't had enough input from the rest of the team for it to be of any benefit, really. So it's just going to cause more headaches. So yeah, I mean, that's a slight sidebar, but I just thought that was a really interesting point this week, and an anecdote around what I'd learned being kind of put into practice. And I could just see my facilitator just going, oh my God, why have you done that? So yeah, I had a vision of him in my head when this meeting was going on, and we were all just sort of sitting there going, oh my God.
Yeah, no, I can imagine what that must have been like. And yeah, so we'll be jumping into the Q&A session. So just a reminder for everyone, please pop in those Q&As, those questions you have for Amy. One thing you said, Amy, that stood out to me is putting the people first. And, often, in any profession, I imagine, when you get so skilled that you often forget the basics, the foundations. And
Yeah.
for product management, it seems to be like always putting people first and having people at your heart. So I think to anyone listening today, that is one of the best skills that you can come into this, is the love for people, active listening, having empathy to understand what customers are actually going through. So lastly, before we get into the Q&A, Amy, any advice you'd give to anyone still, on the fence or considering whether this is the right move for them?
I guess it would be, it's a real commitment. And I know that, you sort of talked about 10 to 15 hours a week, but which doesn't sound like an enormous amount. But if you think of, if you've got a full-time job, if you've got kids, if you've got, that takes away from the time that you would watch TV, the time that you would game, the time that you would see friends. So I would say, if you're going to do it, commit to it, and make the most of every single session. Like even as I said, the induction, I think I kind of thought, oh, it's making sure that we can all access the content, and it's a bit of a tick box exercise, but actually I got so much more out of it than I could have ever imagined. And it was really beneficial in setting those roadblocks for how to get the most from the rest of the course. And having that bookended by the employer project as well, which, just be aware, that is a very time consuming project, but it is the one that I probably I got the most out of, because it sort of brought everything that we'd learnt to life, and there was that sort of real life application of what we'd learnt. So I would say it is absolutely beneficial. It 100% was one of the main reasons why I got this job, because it showed that even though I don't necessarily have the skills for this specific role. It showed the commitment to study. It showed the commitment to wanting to move over into this industry. But don't underestimate these sacrifices that you probably will have to make. It's a short time. I mean, it's not the end of the world. I did kind of finish my employer project and kind of go, I don't actually know what I'm going to do with my time now. Look at all this time I've got. But yeah, just be warned. If you're going to do it, and if you're going to do it well, which is the only way to do it, then the benefits outweigh the negatives, but it is absolutely a commitment.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. And those are very wise words. I think with anything, when you're investing in your future, when you're investing something that has such big impact, one has to make the sacrifices, make the commitments. But as you all heard, it's ultimately very worth it at the end of the day. So, Amy, just a few questions from our audience. I won't get through them all, but some of these I'll be answering in our few minutes after Amy's Q&A, because they are more general questions. So very quickly, 2 questions have come through, Amy, that want to know, what is it like a day in the life of a PM, a product manager?
Day in life, and no day is the same, which is actually the best thing about it. I start with optimistically with a list of what I'm going to try and get done that day, and inevitably other things crop up. I worked as a PA for a really long time, a freelance PA, and was very much in charge of my time, and also how quickly I could get things done. The onus was on me. So one of the things I was told when I started my new job is you've got to sort of match the energy of the people that you work with. And in some instances, that is sort of slowing right down. In some instances, that's sort of speeding right up. So, I mean, a lot of what I do at the moment, I mean, for example, I am working on some communications at the moment. So within the claims department, there is first notification of loss, so FNOL. That's the most important communications that we send out to customers. So my bosses, thrillingly charged me with kind of rewriting all of those in collaboration with our tech team, so making sure that they're all up and running. And the impact on that is that then we've got to change the frequently asked questions on the website. So there's website changes that need to be done as well. So there's lots of compliance, legal, and then there's copy. So we have with the business that I work for, we have a tone that has to be sort of kept to. So there's a lot of stakeholders involved. So quickly before I came online, I was sort of sending something had come back from copy. So I sent it back to the SEO, the search engine optimization team, just to double check that they were happy with it. So hopefully when I get off this call, they'll sign it off. Then it can go to the stakeholder. Our CEO is actually also really involved. Comms and digital, the digital journey is one of his sort of focuses for the future, because he gets, that is the future. So he's very involved in the sort of product team. So he might see them as well. So it's just making sure that it's sort of, you're the link between the conduit between a lot of people. So I'd say that that's the majority. And I'm not actually sitting and working. It's sort of chasing people and harrying people and trying to kind of get people to do things in a timely manner. But as I said, no day is the same. And you start the day thinking you're going to do one thing, and inevitably it ends up being something completely different. So, but I enjoy that. I enjoy the challenge.
All right. So anyone who likes surprises or things not going to plan, I think this is a great career choice then.
Yeah.
2 more questions, Amy, before we let you go. So one is, having worked in fashion, what do you think about the role of product manager in the fashion industry? Is it something you're keen on?
So that was interesting, actually, because when I first had my career session, my career coach said the same thing. Would you like to do something in fashion? And I know that there are lots of roles within the fashion industry, but I think, as I touched on before with you, Jamie, for me, it's about the culture and about the people. I know it's, for my brother-in-law as well, who's a product manager within media, it's also, it is a tough industry, to be perfectly honest, to get a foothold in. So I think you have to be quite creative as to how you end up in a role, even if that is maybe moving sideways within a company, or starting in a role that maybe isn't, and then moving into product, which is kind of what I did. I mean, I would absolutely work for a fashion company. My experience is, and this is not everyone's experience, is that, well, so far, car insurance people seem to be a little bit nicer than fashion people. So, but I know that there are definitely lots of roles, and it was something we sort of touched on. But for me, the sort of people culture was really important. So the company that I'm working for now, that ticks those boxes. But I wouldn't rule it out in future. I know that, product is product managers and their role, and the role itself is on the ascendance, and people are realizing how integral they are to business in terms of business change and processes. So, and as I said, that sort of conduit role. Yeah, if the type of business that you work for is important, then and you want to work within fashion, then yeah, as I said, I know there are lots of roles like that out there.
Thank you so much. So yeah, again, the world's your oyster, everyone. So decide that quite early on, or discover that as you go on. And then lastly, Amy, it's just around, some advice around, you're coming into the program, you speaking about mentorship, going for coffees, networking.
Mhm.
What advice do you have for anyone coming in that perhaps wants to also starts mentorship or wants to reach out quite early on?
Yeah, I mean, if it's within your business, if you're within a business and you know that where you want to be, but you're not quite there yet. I mean, I literally just teamed people and just sort of said, I've seen this role. I'd be really interested in following up with it. And I think somebody mentioned a coffee. Sometimes it was a coffee in the canteen at work. There is a site that I can go to locally that I would meet up with people, or sometimes it was just a sort of quick chat for sort of 10 minutes. And I probably did that with about 3 or 4 product managers when roles came up. And this ultimately the one that I ended up getting was with my current boss. But that was just circumstance, the right role, and timing, I think, as well. But I would say that that's the thing to lean on your career coach for as well. So if you're either not in a business where there are product managers that you can reach out to, or you're looking to start at an entry level product role, then I know that is where a lot of my cohort used LinkedIn to its benefit. As I said, that I'm not the person to ask about that. But that's where your career coach, I would say, would come into play with a really good plan of action as to how to break into your first product role.
No, that's really good to know. And Nick, before we let you go, Nick has mentioned that you've said you spend a lot of time chasing people in your role. Do you feel this is the biggest part of the role, or is it being more creative? But you did mention that every day is not the same. It seems to be a blend of different activities for you.
It depends. So we do have kind of scrums. So at the moment we are in the process of finishing off some home claims comms. So that is definitely very chasey, because we're trying to get sign off on things. Whereas with the ethanol process that I talked about before, that is in the mapping stage. So that is chasing people, but that's chasing people for information. A lot of what I do in my particular role is as a facilitator. I'm not supposed to be an expert in anything. I'm supposed to draw on the expertise of other people. And that does mean that, and whether that's tech expertise or that is literally claims expertise, and you're bringing the information all into a map that can then be used to do documents, etc. So there is a lot of chasing in what I do. But again, that was a lot of what I did in my old role, PAing. There was a lot of sort of management and communication, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. The difference is now that I have a lot more autonomy. So even though I'm working within a business, it's I kind of work to my own sort of schedule as such. So yeah, stakeholder management with my particular role is definitely there's a lot of that. So I would say that communication and dealing with people, whether it's tech people, whether it's the CEO, whether it's everybody in between, that is something that you do work on within the course. There's quite a lot around those sort of more theoretical practices, but it is definitely a big role and a big aspect of the role that I am doing at the moment.
All right. So yeah, that's been so good to hear. And Amy, thank you so much for your time. I've stolen a bit more time from you than budgeted for today, but I really do appreciate it, and I hope everyone has found some value hearing from Amy. This recording will be on YouTube, so if you missed anything, please feel free to watch it afterwards. But Amy, again, from me, myself, the Fourth Div team, and everyone on the call today, thank you so much for
You're
joining
so
us.
welcome. Good luck, everybody. And by October, I will have a LinkedIn, so do feel free to reach out to me then.
Yes.
But yeah, it's a great course, so I would recommend.
All right. Thank you so much, Amy. Now I'll be getting to some other questions now that is a bit more general. So Hoda asked how many live sessions happen per week and roughly around what time do they happen. So our live sessions will be scheduled during orientation. So you will get the days and the times confirmed with you during the orientation period so that you can schedule that in advance. And usually there'll be one session per week, and that's a 1 hour session with your dedicated course facilitators. Then Theo, so Theo, we've got to your questions around what you know Amy would have done differently in the course and also around networking. But please feel free to reach out with further questions if you need clarity there. Ola, do we get content to work through during the induction period? So no coursework is done or no course content is done during that first 3 weeks. Course one only starts after that orientation period. But what the orientation is about is getting you set up for success. So we don't just throw you, into the deep end of coursework, but it's a gradual process of having some sessions around time management, scheduling, being a student again, and ultimately getting back into that rhythm. So this is an important 3 weeks to remember. Um, Hoda, again, how many hours per week would do students dedicate to the program? So as Amy said, it's slightly different. The average that we recommend you budget for is 12 to 15 hours a week. Of course, there'll be additional course readings and activities that you also have 6 months after the program ends to access. So it means 12 months overall, you'll have access to the learning content, but you'll get your portfolio done in 6 months so that you can be job ready by then and access all of that additional readings and to deepen your knowledge after the program as well. Then any other questions? So balancing your own work with team meetings. So sorry, Amy left before this one came out, but from my experience, it's self-paced. So if you find yourself working a lot during the day, and you could dedicate hours on the weekend or vice versa, that would work. Some students have most of the time available on the weekends. So remember that it's ultimately up to your schedule as well. So everyone here has an enrollment advisor, a dedicated enrollment advisor. It might be me. So um, if I am your enrollment advisor, if you received emails from me or communications, please reach out to me directly after this call with more questions. Our application process, your enrollment advisor will be able to send that through to you. The application process is very straightforward. We have a look at a few documents like your academic certificate, your CV, and a personal statement. This is, or once it's received, we'll run this through the admissions board at King's and provide you final approval on that application, ultimately taking about 1 to 2 days to get approved. Our next intake is on the 14th of October, and we have limited seats, only 60 seats available per cohort, and we are almost full. So I encourage everyone, if today's session has been helpful and you think that this is the right step, please do your applications as soon as possible. Get in touch with your enrollment advisors because the spots are filling up. It's one of our more popular times in the year. It's after summer, so lots of candidates are looking to study now. So please don't miss out. Get your applications in early and have your enrollment advisor take you through the process. On cost and payment plans, your enrollment advisor will be able to send through a full breakdown of our costs and payment plans. The full cost is £6,000, and we have two ways to pay. You can pay up front, which has a reduction in the fee of £450. It's a great reduction if you have the ability to make an upfront payment in full. Or you can say, I'd like to split the cost up over interest-free monthly payment options. We have a few options ranging from 6 to 24 months. And again, the interest-free, they require a minimum of 10% deposit, but you could always add a higher deposit to lower your monthly installments. And your monthly repayments will start after the course has commenced. So a 10% deposit to secure your seat before the program begins, and the balance is paid over the selected term. And again, your enrollment advisors will be able to send you a full breakdown. I've added the links in the chat to book a time with your EA, or please reach out to me if there are further questions. I thank everyone so much for your time and have a lovely day forward. Thank you so much for joining us.